At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience, to make stocking your team's breakroom easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable. Using artificial intelligence and data, our experts can create a personalized gene roadmap just for you, customizing your cancer treatment, giving your body exactly what it needs to fight the disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic, because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a mother seeks answers in the disappearance of her daughter. Is she the latest victim of the Long Island serial killer? We'll look back at our review of Netflix's Lost Girls. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband, and yes, the love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
All right, so Kevin, this is obviously Thursday's Rewind show.
Yep.
What is coming up on Monday's brand new podcast?
On Monday, we're going to be looking at another classic title. It's Suspect. It's season 3, and it's called Suspect 5 Shots in the Dark.
Right, but that's a new episode of Crime
It's a new episode. It's a new season of Suspect. It's all 100% fresh.
Yeah, and a good conversation, too. Okay, So what are we going to hear in today's Crime Writers On Classic Rewind?
All right, well, we're going back to March 23rd, 2020. I think it's one of the first weeks everybody was locked inside. We're talking about Lost Girls.
Yes.
This was the Netflix dramatization of Bob Kolker's book.
Mm-hmm.
And the book, that played very heavily in the way I think several of us examined and evaluated the movie.
Because I loved the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so one of the things that you'll hear is my very bad voice.
Yes, you used to be real scratchy back in the day.
I was,
because you had your thyroid cancer surgery and you hadn't yet had your voice repaired.
I know, so we're right in the middle of those two things there.
That was back in your Demi Moore days.
Yeah.
All right, so Kevin, remind me why we're listening to this particular Classic Rewind episode.
Well, I mean, come on, check the news.
That's right. There has been an arrest in a Long Island serial killer case, a story we are following very closely here at Crime Writers on Central.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't want to say it's fun to look back, but it's certainly interesting, when you have a lot of these, unanswered questions and the way that things play out. It's interesting to look at that moment when we didn't know, but we had sort of pieces, and to find out what people thought were important details, and now you can kind of go back and compare, like, that wasn't really that important, or that was a big clue.
Right, and one of the things I'm thinking, of course, about is all the wild speculation I've seen in other documentaries and in other podcasts and so forth, and some pretty well-known true crime people were wrong. But anyway, not Bob Kolker, though. He never speculated at all because he's a great journalist.
Yeah, all right, so how about we take a listen back at our review of Lost Girls?
All right, let's listen to it.
Who is this? Well, I don't know why you're asking me. She hasn't lived here since she's 12, so if she owes you money, you're barking up the wrong flagpole.
Shannon's boyfriend called me last night, asking if I knew where she was. I thought they were just in a fight. I've tried her 5 times, and each time it's gone straight to voicemail. Mom. He's never called me before.
Netflix is out with a dramatized adaptation of the best-selling true crime book and one of my all-time favorite true crime books, Lost Girls. The film centers on Mary Gilbert, the mother of a sex worker who disappeared after being called to a house call on Long Island. At first, Mary encounters resistance from law enforcement, seemingly uninterested in a missing Craigslist escort.
This is my daughter, Shannon Maria Gilbert. There's one here for every day that she's missing, and I'm going to continue posting these until you either find her or die of paper cuts. Do not ignore me.
Nobody is ignoring you, Mrs. Gilbert.
I have a talent for holding grudges, and unless you help me, I'm gonna raise more hell than you can handle. And don't you ever fucking call my daughter a prostitute again!
But the investigation takes a turn when the bodies of several missing women are discovered on the beaches of the South Shore. Mary teams up with other grieving families to keep the stories in the news, yet still struggles to convince detectives that her still missing daughter is among the serial killer's victims, all while investigating several potential suspects from the surrounding community.
How can you say Shauna's not connected? She was last seen 3 miles from the other girls. She was in her 20s just like them. She was small just like them. She was on Craigslist just like them. None of those other girls would have been found if it wasn't for her.
It doesn't mean that we're going to stop looking for her, Mrs. Gilbert.
Mom, what about Hackett?
Even if he did call you, it's not evidence of guilt.
Amy Ryan and Gabriel Byrne star, and the film is directed by Liz Garbus, who brought us the documentary Who Killed Garrett Phillips. The film attempts to tell the story of an unsolved crime while showing the humanity of its victims. We will be giving spoiler alerts for Lost Girls, so to stay spoiler-free, check out the time code listed in our show notes. Now, Toby, you read the book Lost Girls, correct, by Bob Kolker?
Yes, it's awesome.
It is awesome, and it is expansive and sweeping. But this film chooses to take a more intimate, close-up view of this one mother when she finds out her daughter goes missing. What do you think of that editorial choice in making this dramatized version of Lost Girls?
It is not the choice that I would have made, and I don't think it's a very good one. I guess I have some thoughts about why maybe it ended up being that way, but it took what I thought. You know, it's a great book. It's very insightful. It's written with a lot of compassion for the victims. And it's really, I mean, for people who haven't read it or don't know much about it, it really follows, it's 4 or 5 young women who are sort of in the new world of, you know, sex work, where they use the internet. It's like internet facilitated sex work. So instead of having like being on a street or whatever, being like a call girl, you put ads in Craigslist or Backpage or whatever. And, you know, it's about how these women, their lives, and then they disappear, and then are found dead. And so it's really interesting. And I thought when you were reading the summary of this movie where you're talking about honoring the victims or whatever, you know, I didn't get that at all from this. Like there's almost nothing about the girls or the young women who are really the focus of the book. You know, it changes the focus from being on these young women who are trying to sort of make their way in this profession, and they all have these circumstances that make this, you know, one of their few avenues out. And that seems completely missing from this movie, which quite honestly, it seems like kind of a paint by numbers.
Yeah.
And there's almost nothing from the book that makes it into the movie except for a few details about the mother and this group of other mothers and relatives who meet to look into it. But a lot, even the sort of sketchy guys who hang out in that little beach town are really interesting characters and sort of have an air of the sinister about them in the book that they really don't in the movie. And I couldn't figure out why they didn't spend more time with that. I was super disappointed, and I'm sort of at a loss as to why it ended up the way it did, given the source material.
It's interesting that you should mention the location, Toby, and the people who live there, because to me, you know, as somebody from Long Island, the fact that these crimes took place in and around the Gilgo Beach area is one of the most interesting things about them. Now, they don't get into this in the movie at all, and I don't know why, because it is one of the most interesting aspects of the book. But if you live on the South Shore of Long Island, you know Gilgo Beach is this very odd community. It is not like the Hamptons, where it's like multi-billionaires, you know, living in these like ritzy beachside houses. Mm-hmm. This is a community on the beach, and there's nothing around it. It's sort of on this barrier island, and it's pristine and beautiful. The state owns the land on which the houses sit. So what ends up happening is that you get these people who are not, I mean, there are some wealthy people there. It's a gated community, but there are also some like cops who live there. Some like, you know, like a plumber who's been in business his whole life could live there. It's not like a Tony, like it's just a weird little cloistered space. And it ends up having in real life a couple of very viable suspects living right in this little place They don't explore that at all in the film. And they also don't explore in the film another thing about the place this happened, which is that the police department in Suffolk County had a history of corruption and a lot of disinformation around this case, not explored at all. Instead, we have this like Gabriel Byrne character who can't even like not do his Irish accent for 4 seconds.
Oh, no, but that's actually the real life person was from Ireland.
It was still weird though.
Yeah, anyway.
That was also not explained.
Yes, that wasn't explained, yes.
Anyways, not explored. But Laura, I mean, one of the things I kept finding myself wondering is that another fictionalized true crime thing on Netflix that we saw a few months ago, one of the greatest things we ever reviewed, was Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Which was a multi-part series. How many parts was Unbelievable, Kevin? It was like
6 parts.
Yeah, it was long.
Might have been
8?
longer than that. Yeah, could have been.
Based on an article, a true crime article. This is a true crime book that is long.
Yeah.
And they condensed it to this very short film instead of giving it a multi-part treatment. And we often complain that Netflix things are too long, but do you think the length was right for this or that it should have been longer?
Well, so I didn't read the book. I do remember when this case happened. I remember on the news when they found the bodies on the beach and it was out there pretty visible when their bodies were first discovered. So I'm coming into it from a little bit of a different angle in terms of my like pre-existing knowledge because I didn't read that book. But I did feel like it was just sort of lacking in terms of like the storyline of the other victims. Like we saw their families, you know, obviously we're following Mary and her family because she ends up being sort of like the leader of things. But I felt like, you know, how many times have we watched, like you said, something on Netflix and it's like, okay, they totally should have just done like 4 episodes and been done with this. And it's like 8 episodes and you're like struggling to get through it just because they're dragging it out. And here, I guess I don't understand. I mean, who knows what went into the decision making, but it seems like they had ample research already done on this case from this book where they very easily could have then used that to, you know, tell more of the stories. Because I was curious, like, who are these girls? How did they, you know, get into this work? How did they end up working there? And I had no idea about that community, Rebecca. When I saw the gated community, I'm thinking, oh, this is like a wealthy community. And that also made me a little more suspicious about like what's going on there, like in this community that's high, you know. So I definitely think they could have made it longer. And, you know, there would have been plenty of information to keep people's interest.
You know, what I just keep hearing in the previous review and this one is us complaining about the format versus the story and whether the format is right for the story, whether this, as opposed to whether this is a good story for that format.
What do you think? Is the story?
Well, I mean, I don't.
You don't know anything about the book. What do you think of this movie?
Well, I can tell you what I think about the movie, but I'm not going to give it thumbs down because it's not a 6-part series on Netflix.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
No, I don't get
it. I don't think that that's a fair criticism.
But if you read the book, I think you feel differently about this movie than
I'm
you
sure
did
there's
read the
greater
book.
source material.
Yeah,
but the selection was to go with a dramatized version of it,
of one tiny part of it. Not of the whole thing.
Sure, of one tiny part of it, sure. But just because it wasn't, we're going to do a documentary about it, doesn't mean it's... Now, if you want to criticize whether it's a bad movie,
that's what we're going to talk about
I will give
next.
you that.
Okay.
But I'm not going to say, oh, well, it should have been this, so that's the reason why it's bad.
I think it's only fair game, though, because Bob Kolker's book is a modern classic. It is so good.
And Bob didn't write this movie.
No. So here's my question for you.
Bob got to go to all the parties.
Yeah. I thought... Amy Ryan gives a great performance in the film. I don't think you can deny that she gives a great performance in everything.
No doubt.
You know, that some of the filmmaking stuff was really strong. But I think this movie felt like an after-school special. It didn't feel like something that brought me anywhere in particular other than sort of exploring like the fight of a mother in a way that we've seen in a million other dramatized versions of stories like this, where my child was wronged and nobody believes me. My child's a victim and nobody believes me. I'm a victim and nobody believes me. Kevin, are you going to make a case that I'm wrong? Do you think this was a better movie than I think it was?
I probably think it's a little better than you think. Okay. I don't think you think this is a good movie at all. I think it does have its problems. So, some of the scenes and some of the characters feel a little two-dimensional. Like, I'm thinking of that scene in the empty diner where all the families get together and everybody seems like there's one type. There's a,
an archetype, yeah.
Maybe we should go around. I'm Missy. I drove in from Connecticut for my sister, Maureen. It's so good to finally meet all of you in person.
Lorraine. My daughter's Megan. I sold my TV to be here from Maine. So I have the cash to stay here until the vigil.
Sorry I'm late, y'all. We were just going around introducing ourselves, where we're from, who we've lost.
Okay, Kim, North Carolina. I like Rocky Road ice cream and long walks on the beach. And my sister was Amber.
You know, and again,
I'm the tough old broad.
I didn't read the book. I know you guys did. I don't know if that scene actually occurred. And, you give dramatic license in a docudrama like this for those kinds of scenes. But I just kind of felt like it just seemed a little too convenient and that everybody was just sort of a different color in the crayon box. You get one of everybody in this salad of sanguineness. And then, the sister who's like, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to turn tricks too because it's all my life is. It just felt like, were these people in real life? Because then you can say, well, okay, sure, then I guess that makes sense. But some of it seems, it's kind of the, if it didn't happen, you wouldn't believe it kind of thing.
Yeah. The sister ends up killing the mother later.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not talking about Mari's daughter. I'm talking about
Okay.
the sister, one of the victims.
Yeah.
Remember, she storms out of the motel.
Yeah. Never mind.
She's going to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and she does go. And like in the book, that is an issue, is that she does go back.
Yeah.
Then that's not a bad way of telling that note.
Yeah.
To get it in. But I think probably trying to do too much, with the story.
Well, I want to talk about the crime and the way that it's portrayed in the movie, because it's a very interesting crime story insofar as that the reason that there is a Long Island serial killer story is because there are all these bodies, right? There isn't necessarily agreement that they were all killed by the same person. There's some disagreement on that. Some people think that like Joel Rifkin, the convicted serial killer, may have been responsible for some of these murders. There's just disagreement about whether or not there even is a serial killer, and that's in large part because of the marginalization of the victims. But Toby, one of the things that I'm curious about is that Shannon, who is the victim that they choose to sort of focus on in this movie, there is stuff that is known about what happened to her that night, insofar as that she did have like a series of phone calls with her driver and stuff. Is it clear to you in the film that she was the victim of a crime, or do they not? I mean, I felt like they didn't really flesh out enough. Like we weren't present in that scene enough to really kind of get an understanding of what could have happened to her.
Yeah, I mean, that was of the many problems with this movie. One of them is that if that's going to be the central crime that's going to be investigated and that's why she died, you get little pieces of it, but it doesn't make much of a picture. And again, I don't quite get it because the source material makes for sort of this very chaotic, disturbing scene in this guy's house. And they kind of hint at it, but they don't really get to it. So you don't really know. I mean, it just seems like she runs out of his house, runs down the street, runs into the bushes, and that's it. And that's not really what had happened. So again, I don't know why they simplified it. Because if the thing is to make this into a, you won't tell me what happened to my daughter, take this seriously type of thing, if that's a choice, like why wouldn't you make the circumstances of her disappearance be as tangible as possible? Instead of, even the way you get it is from a few different, little snippets of the driver talking, and then there's a little bit of the opening clip of her running with a car chasing her, it looks like, for some reason. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of vague. You didn't have to call this movie Lost Girls. I mean, you didn't have to associate it with that book. It seemed like kind of a paint by numbers thing, and you threw in a few names and a couple of situations, but otherwise you didn't have to use Lost Girls to come up with this movie.
I think it just did Hollywood and crime.
Laura,
Picked it from 50 nameless places.
Laura, there is sort of a lack of resolution in the story. I mean, it's inherent in the real life story, and that is still an unsolved case. But in this story, as Toby said, we don't really explore the Dr. Hackett stuff. We don't really explore the other neighbors fully. We don't really explore, the stories of the other girls. Do you find that lack of resolution of any of the threads dissatisfying?
Yes. I was frustrated because I felt like, this is a horrible crime. You watch all these people band together. I was kind of hoping at the end that I would at least, have that sort of epilogue that's like, this is where the case is. These are who the suspects are or something. But it was just sort of the epilogue was like this super depressing, by the way, she got killed by her other daughter who's schizophrenic and, end of story. So I was frustrated. But I mean, that is sort of the nature of some of these cases, that, they're hard to investigate and they're hard to, I went online today because I was curious again. I was like, what is going on with this case? Is there any sort of, direction that they didn't sort of talk about? I just sort of hoped at the end that I would have some sort of a sense of, where things were going. But I just kind of felt like, sounds like it's kind of just on hold for now. So that was a little bit frustrating because I did feel after, all the activism on the part of the families to actually get these cases taken seriously, it would have been nice to see something come from that.
I was not 100% comfortable with how they handled the suspect, Dr. Hackett, because Liz Garber, who's the director, did sort of something similar in Who Killed Garrett Phillips, too, where, remember they had that cop?
Yeah.
And that, where they kind of just race right up to the edge of calling somebody else a killer, but just kind of like run there, but don't get all the way there. But kind of leave you wondering, like not far enough to say, you've libeled me and you've slandered me and you've made an accusation against me. But to start like getting you close there and not resolving it.
Well, not backing it up. Because here's the thing. I know we're trying to just review the movie on its merits. Bob Kolker backs it up. The book makes a very compelling, there's more than one suspect in this case. And they are all very compelling suspects for very different reasons. Like, right, Toby? Like, there are two. I remember there being like two very strong suspects. Bob Kolker's reporting backs it up.
So would this have been a better movie if you didn't read the book?
I think,
and then wonder about the book.
I
for
think
2.5
this would have been
hours?
a better movie if it were given. So, because like I hadn't read the Unbelievable article for years, and that dramatization was great because they gave all of the pieces of the reporting the service that they needed dramatically to sort of understand. And you sort of had the sense, even if you hadn't read the article, like you understood why the police did this, why this person was in the frame and this and that. And this didn't do it the same service that the real life journalism did. And I don't think that you don't have to read the book. What the comment you just made is an illustration that she went up to the line and, put him in the frame. That's an illustration that it's just not a well-made thing. You don't have to have not read the book or not to know that. You just knew it. You know what I mean?
And just even sticking with that, if he's like the big suspect, the big showdown with him lasts about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You're building up to this big moment where the mother of the victim and the person she thinks is probably the perpetrator, like the big showdown, and it's like 30 seconds. And he puts his hand on her shoulder, which is kind of creepy. But that's it.
Yeah. I mean, her daughter was in his house. He admits that.
Again, like, I hate to keep going back to the book. There's so much about him that is so sketchy in the book that would have been so easy to just put into this movie.
Yep.
And they just don't do it.
Yeah.
They don't do it. I don't understand why.
Yeah. Strange choices. All right. Well, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, if they haven't yet, should they check out Lost Girls on Netflix? This is a dramatic film adapted from Bob Kolker's all-time great true crime book, which if you have not read, I cannot recommend highly enough, and neither can Toby. Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you. Thumbs up or thumbs down for Lost Girls?
Well, so I didn't read the book. So I went into this blind. I knew a little bit about the case from just watching general like cable news when the bodies were discovered. So I actually liked it. I mean, there was things that were frustrating to me about the ending and some of the things that happened throughout. But overall, I mean, it was like what? It was like an hour and a half long. So it was definitely something that, I watched and I was like, okay, yeah, there's some stuff that I did want to know some additional information. I think if I had read the book, it sounds like from the discussion of Rebecca and Toby, I would have not liked this. But I actually liked it.
Toby Ball, what about you?
I didn't like it at all. I think even if I had not read the book, it just seemed kind of run of the mill. So, yeah, but just read the book. The book is so good. You can listen to, we had a great discussion about it on the deep dive. So you can listen to that too. It's not the worst thing ever made, but it's just a huge missed opportunity. And, it just kind of seems like sort of dime a dozen.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm with Laura. I'm a thumbs up. Not a big thumbs up, but I think that I can't sit here and say I was asked to review chicken and I'm going to say it's too bad it wasn't steak.
Yeah.
We were asked to review a movie, and so I'm not bogged down by the book. And yeah, maybe it would have been better served in a different format, but this is what we have. This is the movie we deserve. And it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't deny that Amy Ryan did not give a fantastic performance.
She always does.
And it's difficult when the case is unsolved in real life. I mean, it means you can't solve it on the screen either. So it has some weaknesses, but overall, I think if you're home and you don't have anything to do, I think it's okay to watch.
Yeah, I really hate to do this because I don't want Bob Kolker to know I said it because I love him so much. But anyway, I have to give this a thumbs down. I didn't particularly enjoy watching it. It doesn't even live up to the premise of the title. It's called Lost Girls, and it focuses on, one of the victims instead of the totality of the victims. This is, let's face it, one of the most interesting unsolved serial killing cases in America. And the choice to just take it to a point where we're only telling it through one lens was a misstep. And I also don't think it was done well. I'm not just saying that because I read the book. It felt a little after school, especially to me. That's just how I felt the whole time I was watching it. And there were just some, very sloppy details. We have New Yorker saying it was in Long Island. Nobody says that. It was on Long Island. I know you think I'm being picky, Kevin, but that is a very easy thing that anybody in the writer's room could have just corrected in the script. And that was one of many things like that just sort of stuck out to me. And I'll just say it again. Read or listen to Bob Kolker's Lost Girls. It is one of the greatest modern true crime books written. It is fantastic. You'll learn so much. You'll feel so much empathy for all the victims, and you'll be drawn into an unsolved case that has a couple of really fascinating suspects. This movie does not do it justice, so I cannot give it a thumbs up. So for me, Lost Girls is a thumbs down.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
At Staples Business Advantage, we help you select from 2,000 breakroom products, so you can be sure there's something for everyone.
Yum. Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're conquering the unconquerable, using data and AI to create personalized gene roadmaps to fight cancer more effectively. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.
So that was a fun rewind to listen to, Kevin. That was a really interesting conversation.
It was.
Yeah.
It definitely was. Yeah, and I'm glad we had a chance to think about that one again. And, I don't know, maybe some of us will go back and watch it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that your voice is sounding a little bit more healthy these days.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So on Monday, we'll be back, and we're going to be talking about Suspect, 5 Shots in the Dark. Season 3, yes.
Very exciting. So as always, this show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where our shows are never as good as the book was. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Partners in Crime Media.
At Staples Business Advantage, nothing can top the smarts and instincts of the thousands of experts on our team, while AI excels at
processing data, automating tasks, and providing insights for better decision-making.
And when they're used together, they're far more powerful than either is alone.
Whoa. I've never felt more alive.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience, to make business easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.